Hiring your first team member in your business can be exciting and scary at the same time. But what you probably don't realize is that there's a key distinction between hiring an employee versus hiring an independent contractor. So in this video, what I'm going to do is walk you through the key differences between hiring an employee versus an independent contractor, what they're entitled to depending on what you actually classify them as, and ultimately what you need to do in your business once you've determined what their classification should be. Hi, my name is Brian Nguyen. I'm a CPA and a tax advisor with CleverProfits, which is an online accounting firm for agencies, coaches, and creators. And if you're new here, please go ahead and hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons down below for weekly tax and finance updates for your business. The distinction between hiring an employee or an independent contractor can be subtle to get right, but extremely catastrophic to get wrong. So that's why we're going to spend this video focusing on how to determine whether or not someone is an employee in your business versus an independent contractor. Now, an employee is someone who typically operates under your direction and control, which means that they have to do what you tell them to do when they're working for you to get paid. Because of this, they typically qualify for additional employee protections that an independent contractor wouldn't ordinarily get under both federal and state labor laws. For example, if you employ someone in your business, you're probably required to pay payroll taxes for them, which can be around 7.6%, pretty hefty, in addition to making sure that you're paying for workers' compensation insurance, making sure that you're complying with the wage and labor laws, making sure that you're complying with anti-discrimination rules, and a lot of little nuances in hiring an employee that you don't necessarily have when bringing on an independent contractor. Now, an independent contractor operates a little bit differently because they don't operate within your level of control and influence. They typically operate with a lot more autonomy, which means that they're able to do their same things in the role that they have with you. So they're still working for you, they're still getting paid by you, but how they go about it is a little bit different than an employee. Typically, we see independent contractors operating on an hourly basis or on a project basis, but it's usually for short-term work and not nearly as close to full-time. In addition, an independent contractor is not typically getting paid on a monthly basis to do their work like an employee would on a fixed salary. So those are some of the key distinctions between an employee and an independent contractor. Now, one of the benefits of hiring independent contractors is that they're technically cheaper. You don't have to actually pay payroll taxes for an independent contractor like you do for an employee. And in addition, they typically have to pay their own self-employment taxes to compensate in order to contribute into Social Security and Medicare. So that's a key savings difference between hiring an independent contractor versus an employee that you want to take into account. Now, where people screw up is that they just assume that they should hire as many independent contractors as possible without actually looking at the key fact patterns that distinguish whether or not they should be an independent contractor. Remember, it's not necessarily about what's convenient and affordable for your business, it's actually what's right under the laws. So you really have to look at the working relationship that you have with your first team member before you hire them and while you're working with them before you can determine adequately whether or not they're going to be an employee and an independent contractor. And really that's looking at 3 different tests and a variety of different facts and circumstances around the work arrangement with you. So I'll give you an example. The first one is how much are they actually working for you? Because if they're working full-time in your business, the likelihood is that they are probably going to be classified as an employee, solely because they're doing all their work for you, right? And because of that, because they're working specifically for your business, you're going to have to treat them as an employee, and you're going to have to pay them accordingly and make sure that you're complying with all the laws. Another example is the level of direction and influence that you have over them. If they are doing the same thing for other clients, for example, that they're doing for you, that actually indicates more of a consulting basis relationship, in which case they are probably going to be more leaning towards an independent contractor. But if they're doing something that's critical and integral to your business, and they're doing it only for you, then the likelihood is that they're really going to be an employee rather than an independent contractor. And lastly, another relationship they want to understand further is how they're being compensated. If it's on a project basis where they're assuming most of the risk for their compensation, then they're more likely to be an independent contractor. But if they're getting paid on a monthly basis on a fixed recurring amount, they're more likely to be they're more likely to be an employee. So those are factors and considerations that we want to take into account before you definitively conclude whether or not someone is an employee or an independent contractor. So if you figured out the classification, what's the next step? Well, let's look at whether or not this person is an employee or an independent contractor. If they're an employee, there's probably a much longer list of things that you're going to have to take into account before you can properly say that you're in compliance with hiring them on. The first thing that you're going to need to do is verify their identity, and you can do this using the form I-9. And this tells you that they're actually qualified to do work in the United States based on their status. And they're going to have to provide a social security card, or they're going to provide a birth certificate in order to actually make this verification and claim that they can actually work for you. So that's the first step, is actually verifying whether or not they are qualified. The second thing that you need to do is actually draft a proper employment agreement that indicates and dictates all the roles and responsibilities that the employee is going to have and how they're going to be compensated for that role. So things like a salary, benefits, 401k, retirement plan options, and also what happens if they don't do their role and any protections around that. And the reason why you really need an employment agreement in place is because it's really going to solidify your relationship with them and come to terms with exactly who is responsible for what and what happens when things actually go south. So that's really important to have in place. It's not technically required, but it's really important to protect you in the event that something were to happen, God forbid, in this relationship. The next thing that you're going to want to have is workers' compensation insurance. So as soon as this person actually comes on board, you actually need to add them to the workers' comp insurance to make sure that you're complying with your state's laws. In most cases, a state is going to require that you have workers' compensation insurance for this individual, and the reason why is because if they get hurt on the job, that may be something that needs to come out of the insurance amount that you're paying for. If you don't have this, the penalties can be pretty drastic, so you want to make sure that you're looking into a provider who can actually give you insurance as needed. Next thing that you're going to need is to make sure that you're going to register in the state that they're actually physically located. So I'll give you an example. I'm based in California. If a business was employing me and they were out of state, they might have to register their business with the California Secretary of State and apply for a payroll tax or withholding account in California in order to employ and make sure that my wages are being withheld on appropriately and that part of my wages are going to be factored into the unemployment fund in the event that I actually get laid off. And that's a really key requirement. You really shouldn't be setting up payroll without having something like that in place. Another thing is looking at the benefits that they're entitled to. So every state is going to be a little bit different with their labor laws, but you also need to look and see what kind of vacation days that this person is going to be entitled to, or sick leave, PTO, things of that nature, any kind of medical benefits, whether it's federal or state law related. Paid medical family leave is another option that we might want to look at specifically for your state. And so we really need to take a close look and make sure that we're offering benefits to our employees where we're required to, or even if you're not required to, whether or not it's going to be an incentive to actually have them work for your business specifically. And that's something that's very common. Making sure that you're actually running payroll on a regular schedule, especially if this is your first hire. You're probably not used to hiring and paying someone on a regular basis, and so you want to make sure that you're running payroll on a very tight schedule, because not paying your employees can be extremely dangerous for your business with the Department of Labor, and you could be responsible for a significant amount of penalties, something that you don't necessarily want. Now that you're actually paying them, you're actually going to need to withhold on some of their salary in order to make sure that you are remitting a proper amount of federal and state withholding taxes where applicable, and in addition paying in your share and their share of payroll taxes for FICA purposes, and that's really important. So you need to have a process and work with a payroll provider to actually do that and file the appropriate tax returns every single quarter or every single year, depending on what type of schedule that you are on. Okay? Another thing that you need to do is make sure that you provide a Form W-2 to them at the end of the year. This is really important because the IRS needs this in order to make sure that they have on record exactly what they made in filing their tax return. And on top of that, the Social Security Administration needs to reconcile this information with the payroll tax forms that you file to make sure that they're consistent and that everything actually adds up and makes sense. So a lot of this can be incredibly overwhelming in just hiring your first employee, especially if this is something that you're new at. And so what we recommend is actually work with a third-party payroll provider, one that's going to significantly simplify the overall payroll process for you and help you manage this every single period and when you bring on new employees. And the one software platform that we use for pretty much all of our clients is called Gusto. Gusto helps you set up, automate payroll for your business very easily, very quickly, and continue running it so that you don't have to spend all your time dealing with all these little nuances. If you need to figure out insurance, if you need to figure out health benefits, if you need to file your payroll tax forms, withhold, remit, all these little things, Gusto takes care of it, and they make it extremely easy for a very affordable price. So if you want to learn more about it, you can go ahead and click on the link down below in the description, and you can get a hit to Gusto, and you can even get a $100 gift card for your first payroll run. So it's very clear that bringing on your first employee for the first time is a pretty big undertaking and is going to require a lot out of you. Once you've done that, though, adding other employees to your belt becomes a little bit simpler because you've already done it one time. Now, let's say you determine that this individual that's working for you is actually just an independent contractor. Well, then it's going to be a little bit of a different story. It's actually going to simplify things significantly because you don't require as much with an independent contractor when compared to hiring an employee for the first time. And really the only thing you need to do is make sure that this independent contractor fills out something that we call a Form W-9 if they're based in the United States. And a W-9 is very simple. All it does is certify their tax filing status to make sure that you have the appropriate information for them so that when you file your Form 1099s at the end of the year, you can make sure that one, they require one, and two, that you're reporting the proper amounts to the Internal Revenue Service. So that's pretty much it. If this person is outside the United States, though, then you're probably going to want a Form W-8-BEN, which is for foreign parties that are doing work for you outside of the country. And this is a simple certification form that just tells you and signals to you that you're not required to withhold on payments made to them because they're not physically residing in the United States, and it's going to significantly simplify your overall reporting process at the end of the year. So that's pretty much it. Payroll itself is pretty complicated, of course, and hiring your first employee can be a little overwhelming, especially with all the things that you need to do. And really it's about trying to find the best possible partner to help coordinate all this. And we found that Gusto has been phenomenal for our clients in managing the overall payroll process. Okay? If you have any questions around employees and independent contractors, then you're going to want to watch our other videos around payroll and take a deeper dive into it to make sure that you're being compliant with everything around payroll and that you're doing things right when you're bringing on new team members. If you liked what you hear and you want to take advantage of more tax strategies, we have so many more videos on the channel that are going to be coming out explaining how we help our clients save tons of money. And you can check out the videos by hitting that like, share, subscribe button and go into the next one right here.